Okay, if you're having any technical difficulties, try to find your chat feature, which you should be able to go to the bottom of your screen, wave your cursor around and find chat, and then you can put a message down in there. And then either myself or EP will try to respond to you. I'm Trish Gorman, and I just want to give you a very warm welcome tonight or today, wherever you are, to our session. We're going to talk about the strategic leader's role in navigating the unknown. And the shorthand for this is really not the strategic leader's role in navigating the unknown. It's really your role in navigating the unknown. And I toggle between these pretty seamlessly because I believe you all are strategic leaders. I know some of you to be strategic leaders. I know you make tough choices, you put others ahead of yourself, you pursue value. And we're going to do a quick review of what strategic leadership is, although I'm assuming most of you, if you're already in our network, you're familiar with our basic framework and you're eager to get into actually navigating the unknown. This is some stuff about me, places I've worked, things I've done. The most important thing to know about me is that I'm seriously committed to helping people build their skills. Pretty much everywhere I've ever been, I've worked in the area of learning and skill building and knowledge transfer. So today, we want you to mute unless you're talking. Please do send a chat, as EP says. But really, the main thing I want you to think about is this is a learning dialogue. We're trying out a different format than our normal slam. Normally, we'd be sitting around a table and it would be an ongoing conversation. So I'm going to do a mixture of presentation and then have some discussion. And sometimes I'll prompt you to think about a question, to raise your hand, to respond to something, just to help us keep a little bit of structure. We want you to share your questions, share your experiences so everybody learns. If it's sensitive, you can disguise it. I mean, we're totally fine if you say things like, a friend of mine has a real concern about the economy right now, given that the stock market is kind of volatile. That's fine. We can keep any secrets. This is a safe space. And then I really would encourage you to keep the dialogue going beyond today. Hopefully this is a thought starter for you and something that importantly you'll take back to your community, to your clients, to your customers, to your teams, and also to your future self. As we kick off, I want you to get something in your mind. It's one thing to be sort of multitasking, and I'm totally fine if some of you are cooking dinner right now, but think about your own situation and bring some things into your top of mind. What are some of your major unknowns? When we're talking about navigating the unknown, what comes up for you? So my unknowns are how many students are going to be able to have the same learning experience or a quality learning experience online as they would have had in class, as our group is transferring a lot of classes to online right now. Each of you probably has some different unknowns or sources of uncertainty. So either in the chat box or unmute yourself and let's just start sharing a little bit about the situation some of you are finding yourselves in.
I would say that our future workload is the biggest unknown right now.
Okay. And Kellen, is it that you're concerned it's going to be really high, really low, or you don't even know directionally what's happening?
Really low, and the unknown time frame of when it would get back to normal.
Okay. Okay. And I could probably do show of hands of how many people are concerned about either too much or too little business and time frame for what we might think of as a return to normal. But anyone want to either elaborate or take us in a different direction?
I can elaborate a little bit. It feels like the last couple of weeks, all of our really cool ideas and good plans have just been completely derailed and sidetracked, and now it's focused on survival, right? So that unknown is like, well, when will we get back to doing awesome things and not just, trying to figure out how we make it a couple more days.
Okay. No, and very well said, Steve. That's critical for so many different firms right now. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's going to take to get back to awesome. So let's keep that top of mind also. Who else wants to share before we kind of kick off? I don't want to make too many assumptions about what people are facing.
So I work in a medical device company. So for us, unknown whether we would be able to receive enough raw material to supply our customers with medical devices, which are very needed right now on the market.
Okay, thanks, Anastasia. Yeah, so all up and down the supply chains, we've worked so hard in many cases to optimize them, and now we need a little slack in the system. So anyone else like to share before we move on? There's another, oh, go ahead.
Hi, Trish. Good to see you again. For me, it's not only just about the situation that we're living in right now, but I'm about to graduate in May, crossing fingers. And that unknown of what the future, my professional future is going to look like. The job that I do right now is very easy and I don't do much, and I'd like to be challenged. And I just, the uncertainty, because I can go different routes. Like, I don't know how to make a decision, when to be patient, when not to be patient, when to pursue something, when to not, all of that.
No, and thank you for being so candid, Maria. I think a lot of us are facing either career transitions you planned that now might be disrupted, or hopefully you might even see new opportunities in the changing environment. But that idea of when and what to do is at the core of what we're going to discuss. The second question here is very closely related, but thinking about the...
Sorry, before you jump to the second question, I just wanted to make sure the people who are chatting in are heard. And we had Chad say that managing cash is an uncertainty that he's facing. And then someone else commented that working for a nonprofit, that how long the G&A budget will hold out. So similarly.
Thank you for sharing those. Yes, and those are really the survival. When we talk about raw materials, we talk about financial resources, we talk about our own talent and where we think we're going to be deployed, all very central to value creation. And right now, pretty unknown. Switching the question up a little bit, and you'll see me do this a lot, and something that you can do as leaders in your own dialogue that you have with others, is trying to get someone to say what's your unknown is a little different, but related to saying what challenges do you face. And it may be, I'm fundamentally biased towards action, so I think I might do something too quick without really getting enough information. So there's a little bit different focus here on getting to know yourself, being so self-aware that you understand the challenges you particularly might face in an unknown situation. I'm going to trust you now that you've got a few things in your own mind that you're thinking about in terms of unknowns and challenges, because at the end of every little segment we're going to do tonight, I'm going to just stop and have you think about in your own world how what we're talking about applies. And then to the extent you want to share, chat, unmute, talk, we have plenty of time for that. Okay. The topics that I've organized for today are 4. The first is the leader's role in recognizing and responding to uncertainty. Then I want to touch upon how we have to think both analytically and emotionally when we're navigating the unknown. And a lot of us are biased one way or the other. We're going to talk very explicitly about that. Then one of my favorite topics, all chaos is not created equal. And how do you tell what kind of uncertainty you're actually grappling with? And then we have a framework for that. And then time permitting, we'll close with setting priorities, communicating clearly, and making good choices that all of you can take away and go back and apply in whatever community or team or organization you're in. So let's talk first about the leader's role in recognizing and responding to uncertainty. I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation-ish part now, but if you want to interrupt, please do. It'll make it more interesting for everyone, and I'm sure it will add value. A little bit of a recap, what are strategic leaders? Essentially, they're the ones who develop the vision of how their team or organization creates value. And you may, as we heard from Steve and others right now, be thinking about preventing value destruction. We might be going from playing offense to playing defense a little bit. That's still the role of the strategic leader. And how do you do that? You motivate others, you inspire others, and not just to follow the plan, to get things done on time, on budget, but to take appropriate risks. And then you also are the person who's making adjustments. You're taking new information and you're adjusting. Sometimes it's a radical pivot. Sometimes it's just a small mid-course correction. Some people, in fact, many of my colleagues right now are making wrenching decisions to lay off large numbers of people last week, this week, and into next week. Adjusting your priorities about what to keep open, what to do, when to do it, and how to communicate it. And that's our last point here, sharing a compelling narrative about why and when to act. Now, I'm sure some of you are parents and you're used to having your kids ask you when they go to bed at night, Mommy, Daddy, would you please share a compelling narrative with me? Right? No. What do we really say? We say, tell me a story. Tell me a story. We need to tell stories to the people in our communities and the people on our teams about why we're doing things, about when we're doing them, about whether it's urgent or whether we need to wait and get more information or bring more people into to our dialogue before we can act. So these are the fundamentals of strategic leadership. And then most of you have seen this before. This is our 6 principles. So when I talk about self-awareness, there's this core in the center here of who you are. You take ownership and you're self-aware. And you're agile in that self-awareness, knowing that you're going to be growing as a leader all the time. To the right is your role. You support the shared success of others, and you enable others to be their best selves. You're egoless as a strategic leader. And navigate the unknown, which is our big point today. Of course, we can't ignore our goal because, as I always say, what is an archer without a target? We could be incredible people playing a wonderful role, but if we don't have a target to go after, if we're not relentlessly creating value and trying to craft and share a strategic vision, then we're really not strategic leaders. We might be transformational leaders or servant leaders or lots of other types of leadership, which are all wonderful, but we're talking specifically about the kind of leaders who are committed to creating value and sharing with others the where, when, how, and why of that value model. So whose job is navigating the unknown? Okay, is it consultant's job? How many of you are saying, I don't know what to do, I need to call a consultant? And most of you know I've been a consultant, and that's not a bad thing to do, but maybe senior leaders should be telling us what's around the next corner. Perhaps it's the job of everyone. We say safety is everyone's job. We say, everyone should be listening to the voice of the customer. Maybe everyone should be navigating the unknown. Perhaps it's analysts who are going to tell us what's going to happen tomorrow in the stock market or what's going to happen tomorrow in our supply chain. They have expertise in data. There's somebody I hear about a lot when I talk about this. It's a person or a group that's called Not Me. So it's not my job. My job is to be the technical expert. My job is to be the CFO. I hope you realize that that's not, also aside from being not me, it's also not the right answer. And lately we hear a lot about, should government be helping us navigate the unknown? So I'd like to throw it open a little bit and think about what would your answer to this seemingly deceptively simple question be? Whose job is it to navigate the unknown?
I think it has to be, you can go all the way from the executives, but I think in an individual manager's role, they have that ability if they take the time to do it, if they take the time to, think about the unknown and how they go through it. Because I think some of the best ideas come from the people who are closest to the problem. It's not necessarily the executives, right? They know the context and they know how you can apply the idea, but they don't know the solution always.
Nice. Well, and I really like how you're implying that it's a team effort, and that's definitely one of the strongest answers here. Close to the problem, people who have both the knowledge and the resources to actually make a difference. Who else has an answer here? Or maybe a specific, do you have an example of in your own company who's been navigating? And it doesn't have to be this month's crisis.
There's a couple more in the chat. A few people have said it can be everyone's responsibility. There's been one answer, if you want to change, then make a change. So maybe personalizing it a little bit. Another comment says it takes knowledge from all levels and communication to fill in the gaps. And then another comment is it can be everyone's, but leading the charge is left to the senior leaders.
Oh, such great contributions. Thank you, everybody. Keep them coming. And thank you, EP, for sharing them out with everybody. Great insights, and certainly a lot of truth to each of them. Kaylin, do you have something else?
Yeah, I have a point to make. With everyone navigating the unknown, in theory, that sounds great, but then everyone is just moving in their own direction and their own opinion. So if everyone's moving wherever they think it makes sense to move, you're not going to really be aligned to make progress. The concern.
Nice, and that's the reality of it. So I love this, and this is actually a trademark of our Slammer discussions, which is let's get past the platitudes and the nice theoretical things and get into how does it really feel for us. Imagine if you were navigating, take the image of a sailboat crossing a lake, and everyone starts navigating. It doesn't quite work.
No, I can't show you.
We have a young contributor there. Go ahead if somebody unmuted and would like to talk. I'd love to hear it.
There's a couple more in the chat, which this one in particular relates to Kellen's comment. A lot of times it's mid-level management that they're guiding most people on the ground and helping affect the culture. So everyone might be following, or trying to navigate, but the mid-level managers are trying to make the difference. Another comment says, navigating requires moving forward. We just need to know when the boat is allowed to leave the dock.
Oh, I love that one.
And a
very
final
nice
comment is, I'm in the business of healthcare. I'm on the frontline crisis starting in Northern California. I wish my company would listen to my experience so they can learn and prep for what is coming their way.
Wow. Okay, so, and this is, there's a few really vitally important things here, that the people who navigate the unknown, a number of these comments are really hooking into it's people with either knowledge or access or close to the problem. Those are all very similar concepts, but then you have the formal power structure, which often can block the very thing that could help initiate the movement, get out of the dock, cross the lake, whatever metaphor you want to be using there. So let's move on and get to kind of how do you, given that you might be in an organization where consultants are telling, giving the recommendations, senior leaders are the only ones allowed to kind of lead the charge. How do you get your ideas, your insights to matter? How do you inspire and motivate others, whether they're people who report to you or that you report to or that you don't even have a connection to, okay? So what should leaders actually do? And again, it depends what your model is. Depending on what your model is, you'll decide what tools you'll pick up and use. So some people believe leaders should get comfortable with not knowing what's around the next corner. So leaders should be really agile, ready for anything, having lots of different resources and opportunities at any given time so that whatever happens, they can take in the information and react. Others say that that's all right, but leaders should actually be providing those skills and tools all through the organization so everybody can be comfortable with not knowing. Right? We can say we live in a world that's volatile and uncertain, and complex and ambiguous. No one's going to know. So let's all get comfortable with not knowing. Now, there's a different school of thought that says leaders should be providing skills and tools so that others can navigate the unknown themselves. Now, again, this model would say you're somehow in alignment with an overall vision. So, you know, nobody really knows what's going to happen, but we all want to grow 10% next year. Or nobody really knows what's going to happen, but we want to make sure we lay off the least people possible. Now, the last kind of belief structure here is that leaders should explain the unknown and resolve the uncertainty. And each of these, I'd just like you to stop and think for a minute of which is sort of your implicit set of beliefs. Do you really think somebody else should be explaining and resolving the uncertainty, and that's their job, and as soon as they tell you which way to sail the boat or when to leave the dock, you'll execute? If you're really becoming more of a leader, you may be impatient. You don't want to wait for someone else to explain it. You have your own insights, you have your own experience and expertise, and you want to share it. So I'd love to hear any comments about if any of these resonate. Maybe there's a different model you're thinking of. These are the four most dominant models that we see in organizations. Any comments? Spoken or chatted? You can imagine if you're in a culture where you're used to waiting and being told what to do, when there really is an uncertain situation, it's more problematic. If your culture is one where everyone's comfortable with not knowing, what a lot of people would just call an entrepreneurial culture or a fast and yes culture, these kinds of shocks don't have as much of a negative impact. So we're anticipating that people who already have a fairly open culture, people who are already used to dealing with the unknown. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Riley, but I have a feeling your whole organization has dealt with so much uncertainty over the years that maybe this is extreme for you, or maybe this is something that's easier for you to adapt to. But would you or would anyone else like to talk about their current situation in terms of the culture they have?
I can chime in for a little bit. Focus on national and extreme poverty alleviation and so forth. And so, as you can imagine, constantly having to navigate, some of these challenges. For our, culture, our product we produce would be a community of problem solvers. And I think that culture really runs the headquarters office. And it's obviously daunting. I know there's a comment earlier about the nonprofit space and can we make payroll in a few weeks, and how does that work and how do we navigate that? But I think it's all about identifying our resources and becoming as creative and innovative as possible to help navigate this, and also trusting that stuff like this can and will pass. It's about just kind of holding the fort down until we can move forward. So yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Very helpful, Riley. And just, I really think tonight a lot of what I'd love to do is just share experiences and know that others are grappling with the same things. Your positivity is definitely infectious. Thank you. If some of you are craving more of sort of, so what can I really be doing, Trish? Here's one of the things you can do that's very tangible. All of us already are looking at indicators of how well our companies are doing, how well our teams are doing, or our endeavors, whether they're not-for-profit or for-profit. There's three basic kinds of indicators, and most of us don't often stop and think about how can you get out ahead of the curve. So lagging indicators are things like, a really classic example is your quarterly sales report. By the time you have it, it's over, okay? It may have come out in the last day of the quarter, but it's telling you what already happened. That's called a lagging indicator because it's lagging reality. Your annual report, a lot of times your annual performance review, all these are lagging indicators. They're useful, but they're in the rearview mirror. A current indicator is much more useful for us, especially in dynamic times. So that would be something to use the same kind of example. If I have a quarterly sales report, now I have a shipping manifest. These are the things that are on the dock right now. They're being shipped right now, or at least maybe this week, or could be literally daily. Certain retailers, Zara is one that actually is quite renowned for knowing its retail sales in real time. So at any given moment, they know what color and size and stock of every item they have in every store they have around the world. So they can respond in a matter of hours if, let's say, they created a blouse in 4 colors and the blue is outselling the red, yellow, and green. They can go down the supply chain and reorder blue in real time because they have current indicators. If you had to wait for your report at the end of the month to say, wow, blue really sold a lot last February, you're going to be slow to respond. Make sense? Here's where we really want to go. We want to go to leading indicators. We want to see the order book. We want to see people who are thinking about ordering what we have to offer. Now, unfortunately, in the current situation, the lagging indicators for us right now might be the people who've already tested for the coronavirus. We have a current situation that's being updated in many places, hourly or daily. And we want to get to the leading indicator. We want to get ahead of the curve to be able to understand what might happen next. Now, some phenomena lend themselves to these kinds of indicators, but especially things like the stock market don't. So today, I think the stock market was up 9%. Does that mean, if that's our current indicator, does that tell us anything about tomorrow? So we have to be quite careful to extrapolate from data we have and to really find reliable, credible leading indicators that can help us get out ahead of the curve. Okay. So think about yourself, how much of the data you're taking in is actually lagging, how much of it is real-time current, and how can you get more coming into your mind, into your space, into your team, into your dialogue that's out ahead, that's telling you, another classic one is that if you see housing starts, at a certain interval, there's going to be sales of kitchen appliances, because if somebody's building a house, at some point they need a stove and a refrigerator. What does that mean in your world? What are some of the leading indicators? And they can be negative. It might be an indicator that people are going to start canceling their reservations or pushing out their orders or postponing their events. How do you get some of these leading indicators? I'm going to continue unless somebody breaks in or EP breaks in. This little green line at the bottom, that indicates a faint signal. Okay, the signal strength is low. It might be that I see less people buying razors, and I say, does that activity matter? Well, if I'm Gillette, and I notice in the last 8 to 12 months, less people are buying razors, maybe that matters to me, maybe it doesn't. It looks like a kind of low, gentle slope of a line, okay? What we're concerned about is any activity that might lead to something we call a time zero event. A time zero event is when a phenomenon has reached a tipping point and it's too late for you to do anything about it. So if a time zero event happened where people's, to stay with razor blades, shaving behavior changed so markedly that there wouldn't be any way for my company to catch up. Now, come on, I'm Gillette in this example. There's just a tiny little change and a blip in how people are shaving. I'm really not thinking too much or too concerned about a time zero event. And I'm also noticing maybe a little bit that people aren't buying as many razors in drugstores. Okay, so I'm trying to look at shaving behavior, I'm looking at drugstore behavior, I'm looking at my different price points in my razors, running my company. I'm not really thinking about something that's going to be sort of a catastrophic or cataclysmic event out there. But there might be, let's say this is 2 or 3 years down the line, or 1 year down the line, or 18 months down the line, there might be a time zero event. Now, this model, importantly, adds something else. It adds the degrees of strategic freedom. So right now, while the signal strength is low, while not a whole lot's happening, I've got all kinds of ways I can respond. I can drop my prices, I can change my razors, I can change my advertising, I can hire different people, I can do almost anything. Okay. Let's just take, oh, what just happened? My signal strength got much stronger. Right? Now, it didn't happen overnight. I still got my timeline going along the bottom. But now, as the signal strength goes up, everybody in the industry is seeing changes in razor blades. They're seeing Dollar Shave Club. They're seeing people getting home delivery. They're seeing men wearing more facial hair. They're seeing women changing their shaving habits. Okay, this happened over time. Now, if I was hearing the faint signals, if I had some leading indicators, I would have been able to act here or here or here, somewhere on this curve before it became a time zero event, okay? And you might think time zero events are rare, but actually there are people grappling right now with smart city regulations for renovations, okay? It was whispered about 4 or 5 years ago, but now between sustainability and Internet of Things and a number of other smart city changes, architects, builders, construction companies have a lot more to grapple with, and some of them are not able to do it with their current structure. So maybe you're not in the building trade. Well, how about immersive AI in retail? How about where voice replaces keyboards? Way back here, when the signal is low and you have a lot of degrees of freedom, you should be thinking about what's your interface with your customer? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it voice activated? Before it gets to the point where 80% of your industry has made the switch and you're playing catch up, or you can't catch up, or you suddenly become a takeover target or a second rate player. Make sense? This early warning model is fairly basic, but when you're dealing with the unknown, it's really important to know what you're listening for, what you're looking for, and then go actively look for data. So let's go back to the razor blade example. Way back here, could I have done some consumer research? Could I have done some competitive analysis? Could I have found out more about what was happening outside and inside my own company and with my current and past clients? Sure, I could. And the point is that your degrees of strategic freedom drop pretty rapidly as your information increases. So the more I know about something, the more obvious it is to me and everyone else, the less degrees of strategic freedom I have. Now, very unfortunately, we may be finding ourselves in certain industries and geographies right now where the signal strength is getting higher and higher. You know, if we take coronavirus as an example, there were faint signals back in December, January. We started to hear more. We have examples of other geographies and other populations and how they're handling things. Now, I would say signal strength is fairly strong if you're listening. And it depends what you're listening to, what you're looking for, and how you're interpreting the data. Our degrees of strategic freedom back in December and January, and I'll say right now I'll use the city of New York or the United States as our focus. They were much higher. They're never infinite. You don't have infinite degrees of freedom ever, but they were much higher months ago, and they're decreasing over time. It might be easier for you to get your head around Gillette razor blades right now than coronavirus, but the model is robust. It applies over and over. And what I'd like you to think about is what's the next faint signal you're seeing that hasn't yet got to a time zero event that you could be tracking and monitoring. What is happening now in your world? And here's an example if you were in food service. So just today, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Pizza Hut are both owned by Yum Brands. So Yum China is trying out already in mid-March, delivering raw food for home cooking, catering. Now, most of us are pretty familiar with KFC and Pizza Hut. The idea that they would start to be a sort of a blue apron, make your own chicken company or build your own pizza company is not something I would have thought of even as recently as a couple of days ago, okay? But if we're starting to say, gee, we already have this virus, we have economic changes, we have government shutdowns, we have social distancing. What's the next thing we can be watching for? How can we be proactive here instead of being paralyzed and start to think about what are we watching for? Well, if I'm in food, I'd love to be watching what's happening in China, because maybe those are things that we could get ahead of the curve and realize this could be an opportunity to serve customers in the US. And I'm going to pause here and get your ideas. So what were the faint signals you are hearing or were hearing? Does this model resonate for you? And what might be a time zero event? Any of the above. I'd love to hear your comments or put them in the chat, please. Someone's asking me to go back to the model, so I'm going to go back to this model. So the degrees of freedom come down as you actually know more. So this is not just signal strength. This is knowledge. This is data. This is insights. And as you have more of them, paradoxically, you can't do as much with them. It's not like you to be silent, all. Are you typing?
Oh, shoot. We have a couple in the chat. One says, I should have bought Zoom stock. Another one says, I'm thinking that digital currency is one of those things. Money is super dirty, and I read an article that China is encouraging their citizens to use it, and I believe it is referring to digital currency.
Mm-hmm. No, and even the Zoom stock one or the digital currency, these are great. They're maybe even already a little more than faint signals, but they could still be faint in your industry, or they still could have a key insight that could drive you forward. So if you're working for Canvas and you're excited that the whole of education is going online, you should be paying attention to Zoom, because Canvas was dominating the market before everyone got into online a few weeks ago, and there could be rapid changes going on in the competitive structure of the markets. And certainly, I also, there was someone right here where I live who said they're not taking cash for the next few weeks, but it hadn't even clicked with me that it was because it was a carrier for germs. Really nice insight. Go on, EP, some more.
Yeah, there's two more. Morgan says, it's interesting to see the pollution levels in China decrease. The US could have used that as a signal to start social distancing earlier.
Yeah.
And then Gina, who is the one who commented about healthcare, said, I saw this outbreak in China and started warning my healthcare company because it was highly contagious. The likelihood of it coming this way was high. Instead of prepping, we are in reaction mode now. I wish I had this model to show them.
Well, you will always have it from now on, and I hope it serves you in good stead. The terrible thing is that even when you have the model, it's actually hard to tell yourself, what are you reading and watching? Because when you're in the moment, you're either in status quo, or, as if I can pick on Steve from earlier, you know, you're doing awesome, cool new things. So your bandwidth is being well utilized. You're pursuing valuable options, or you're doing your job. So it takes a little extra as a strategic leader to say, I actually want to, you know, be listening for faint signals. I want to be reading and looking at things from different industries or different countries, companies, cultures, and then bringing them back and doing a little bit of thinking about, what could this mean? What could this mean to me or us? So in your world, I want you to think about what faint signals you're hearing now, and it could be about currency, it could be about consumer trends, There's a lot being written about the new normal and how we'll never go back to how we were 2 months ago. And then other people are saying we'll snap back very quickly and people can't wait to get back. So who should you be talking to? Is there someone in your company? Is it someone from your MBA program? Is it someone, a mentor, or even a competitor? What would be a time zero event for you? Where would it be too late to jump on that curve because everyone else already has a jump on you? And then how are you listening and testing your early warning system? One thing to do is to go back, painful as it is, and say, gee, I could have done a lot of things 2, 3, 4 months ago. And going through the after action review to learn so that you're more courageous and you're more sure to pound the table and say, I do see something here. I really think we need to examine it. What's the harm in taking out an option that would help us in case I'm right? Okay, so responses to any of these questions are more than welcome. I believe we're sending out all these slides later, so I definitely recommend it's something that you might want to think about beyond today.
Can I put a plug in real quick? If you would like these slides, please make sure to privately chat me with your email, because some of you, I've tried to chat anyone who I can't see their name and email. So in the middle of your screen at the bottom where it says green share, where it's in green and it says share, next to that is a chat button for anyone who doesn't know. And we'd love to get your email so we can send you these slides.
Excellent. Thanks, EP. And then a couple of people told me that they need to jump off at 1 hour, so I'll probably stop at one point and give those folks a little bit more information for future programming. But let's go to our second topic now. Recognizing analytical and emotional issues in navigating the unknown. I was actually trying to pull into here a little tweet that was, sort of, I'm social distancing, I'm going to be the healthiest I've ever been, I'm going to get in the best shape of my life, I'm going to use this time really well to develop my mind and my body. And then, I don't know, maybe a couple hours later, it said something like, I am now sobbing and eating lasagna in the shower. Okay. Emotions run high during times of radical change. We can have the best intentions, and it might not be you as the leader, you as the team member, it could be others that you're working with, to recognize that it's both emotional and analytical factors that help us to navigate the unknown, and they can help or hurt us. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunities here to be self-aware. So how do you recognize and respond to unknown forces? Think about your own responses. And here I have someone who says, stop overthinking. The picture is of somebody who's doing quite a bit of analysis on a big white board. And a woman saying, I used to be indecisive, but now I'm not sure. What am I trying to depict here? Well, we call it analysis paralysis. Okay? And I want you to think about, is analysis paralysis actually really data-driven? Because my argument would be that we dive deeper and deeper into the data and the analysis and the meetings because there's actually an emotional component. There's a fear, there's an anxiety, there's feelings of being overwhelmed perhaps, or being vulnerable. And all of those are covered over by our emphasis on data. So the first step in being able to get past this is to just acknowledge it. Okay, so there's a fear, there's the vulnerability. I might be wrong. I might do the wrong thing. Getting to that point is really important. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, we have people who we call the cowboys, and the poster child these days is Richard Branson. His picture's here, saying you can't run a business without taking risks. The brave may not live forever, but the cautious do not live at all. Okay, so totally the opposite from the analysis paralysis overthinkers. They don't think at all. They ready, fire, aim. They leap and don't even, this is not a guy leaping and the net will appear. This is just a guy leaping. Okay, so let's ask the question that I'm sure you're anticipating is embracing risk, emotional? Is it personality driven? And now this one's a little less obvious, but again, my argument would be that some of the people who embrace risk are doing it because they have data. Okay? With no risk comes no return. With high risk comes high return. Many of the people who are very risk-seeking, who are courageous in the face of the unknown, have a track record of, whether it's good luck or whether it's great intuition or keen genius, they've been able to act first and think later, and it's worked out well for them. So they have data, and they also see others who have been ahead of the curve, who've taken risk, and who have done well with it.
Trish, we have a comment on the chat that there's different kinds of risk. So I don't know if you want to go a little bit deeper into the specific type of risks that you're discussing.
I'd love for that person, if they want to unmute and talk about it, because absolutely, we could definitely do a whole nother slam session just on all the types of risk. But is there one you have in mind, like career risk versus financial risk? Or
they said they
a
don't
minute
have a
and
microphone.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you for chatting in the chat then. But certainly, yes, embracing risk can certainly be both emotional and analytical. And that's really my point here, is that to say, when we face the unknown, you may be working with somebody who's just going to burrow right into data. And you as the leader might be able to work with that person to draw out some of the emotional blocks that are stopping them from making good decisions. On the other hand, you might be working with somebody who's sort of go, 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 we must go, go, go. And you might want to draw them back and really work on some of the data issues that would help them to see how much risk they're taking and who's bearing that risk. I love the idea of there's many kinds of risk, but there's also many different parties who bear risk. Maybe I take the risk and I get fired and the company still does well. That's my career risk, juxtaposed with the strategic risk of the company. And, they don't necessarily balance out from my perspective, but the company might be quite happy. I want you to think about reorienting not just your thoughts and your feelings or your data analysis and your management of your biases, but really consciously reorient. Okay, so what I'm hearing a lot right now is people who are saying things like, things have changed so much, or even nothing is as it should be. When will we get back to normal? When will we get back to awesome? When will we fix our supply chain? When will we be able to get back to something that seems familiar? And I would say, give up on this entire line of thinking. I know it sounds brutal, but we have this little crystal ball here. And what can we reorient to? Well, the important thing is not to look at how today is different from yesterday. The important thing is to look at today, clear-eyed, what is happening, and then move to the future. So it helps to say things are really interesting right now, right? As opposed to things have changed so much. Just break with the past, because we have a radical discontinuity here. And often it doesn't take coronavirus. I mean, even the poor folks at Gillette had to stop and think, things are really interesting right now. We don't have the lock on the shaving market we used to have. And instead of when will we get back to that, when is Dollar Shave Club just going to go out of business and let us have the market back? When are people going to change their public or their personal grooming habits back to how they were in the 80s and 90s? Not going to happen. So move towards what could be next and how can we be ready? So what comes next could look like the past, but it will not be the past. It'll be a version of some aspects of the past with maybe, as someone said, cryptocurrency thrown in, maybe with more working from home, maybe with restaurants that used to cook food serving raw food. There'll be a resurgence in the use of people's home kitchens. There might end up being sanitizing stations outside everyone's front door. If any of you remember mad cow disease, If you were in the UK at the time, there would be a tray where you'd put your feet in it and wash your boots off before you left agricultural area to go to a urban area. It was a normal thing for a while. Okay. So when you tell yourself things are really interesting right now, what could be next? How could we be ready? You're telling a different story. Your narrative has shifted. How does that feel to you? Does it feel putting a Band-Aid on a stab wound? Are we getting any chat, EP? I want to make sure people without microphones don't feel like they're being overlooked.
I am not seeing anything.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going and come back to this. And some of you are familiar with the concept of VUCA. VUCA is the way a lot of people look at the world these days. V stands for volatility, U stands for uncertainty, C is complexity, and A is ambiguity. And all of these have both emotional and analytical components. So when I ask you, how does this feel to you when we switch our narrative, I also want you to think about what data do you have that supports a new narrative. And that ambidexterity, that ability to be working both on the emotional level and on the analytic level at the same time is what's going to help you to be able to navigate the unknown with more confidence and to be able to connect with more people. So go back to the idea of whose job is navigating the unknown. You need to get everybody aligned, even if they're all doing their own part of that job. And how you get that alignment is by realizing part of it is analytical and saying, you know, how many, how much, when, and part of it is emotional. So in your world, what data do you have, or what data should you be trying to gather? What emotions might you need to process? What are people's real fears? Is it truly a fear of unemployment, a fear of failure, a fear of physical harm? And then where are your biases? Did you feel more like the analysis paralysis, more like the cowboy, somewhere in between? And is your team the same as you are? Because sometimes it's so comforting. You love analysis. You want to just get, you know, the 7th decimal point. You want to dig into the numbers, and your team wants to do the same thing. Sometimes that full alignment agreement is a bad thing because it gives you that groupthink, that comfort level, and you need someone to be jolting you out of it and pulling you the other way to say, hey, haven't we done enough? Don't we know directionally what's happening? Can't we do something now? Stop thinking and start doing. And of course, you see the converse of that argument as well, right? So can you think of any data you have, go back to the Kentucky Fried Chicken example, any company you want to track, how many of you are reading, you know, the news out of China? How many of you are watching the BBC or Al Jazeera right now instead of watching CNN and Fox? Where are you getting information about the world? If your trade association meetings and conferences have been canceled, how are you reaching out to the people who would have spoken there? Are you watching their TED Talks? How are you processing your emotions during all this? Is this just making you feel more overwhelmed or more vulnerable and concerned, or is it helping you feel like you can do something and helping you feel a little more confident and powerful? Comments? Questions?
I think personally, I do keep up with the news of what is happening in other countries, and it sounds like they are taking precautions and they're moving the right way. And then I listen to our president, and I feel discouraged and I feel worried, and I see the market crashing, and so, you know, all those fears build up, and it's I feel powerless, because even though I'm in quarantine, and what's going to happen next week, right? What did he say today? That everything is going to go back to normal on the 12th. Well, is it really? How is that? What is our role? Like, how much power do we have to control our situation? Yeah.
Thank you, Maria. I think you're raising a question a lot of us are almost afraid to say out loud. And one of the advice I would give is figure out what's your domain. Maybe it's just your own friends and family you can influence. Maybe it's your colleagues or your work friends, your trusted classmates, to encourage them to either take care of themselves physically, but also to encourage them to take certain actions. Similarly, you can feel really frustrated. Before this crisis, we were grappling with the US leaving the Paris Accord, and a lot of people who spent much of their career in sustainability and recycling efforts being really frustrated. But many of them redirected at the local level, they redirected their efforts, and they found a way to be pursuing that relentless value. Instead of feeling totally powerless, it's reframing your domain. Easier said than done when you're stuck in your house, for sure. But it could be, even what EP and I are doing tonight. We could just say, oh, we can't have SLAM, the school is closed. But we say, you know what, let's cast the net even further. Let's try to get more people. Let's share really openly, and let's just see what happens. So, I'll look forward to your podcast tomorrow, Maria, and see how you can think of what you can contribute or who you can motivate. Maybe it's not even you, but do you know someone else who could be you could catalyze them to action? Because that's really, leaders in one way don't do anything themselves. They inspire others to do it. But I would say keep listening and looking for hopeful messages, because it's very easy right now to get quite demoralized. So don't let it happen. Let people like Riley talk to you. He's very upbeat.
Yeah, he's great. Actually, I do know.
Yeah. No, and but it's very truthful, and part of it is speaking the truth. Some of the emotions you need to process is to get them out, and also when there's going to be an unfavorable outcome, it's really important to have a transparent process. Okay, so I just want to really make that point strongly, because if you end up saying we have to stay in our houses longer, or we have to lay off people at Gillette because we've lost market share, or whatever it is that's going to happen, if it's undesirable, it's more important than anything to have a very clear process. Who did we talk to? What was the data? What did we do? What were the steps? Who was included? Because it's very hard to accept undesirable news, but it's really almost impossible to make that kind of change if you have had a process that wasn't deemed to be transparent and fair. Okay, so even if you do have to make a tough choice, you don't have the donors to continue, or you don't get to take the job you want, it's really important to make the process as clear as possible. Other comments or questions or responses to Maria?
To go along with what you just said, had an interesting experience this week where we were given a mandate, and without a whole lot of direction, kind of just hey, go and do this. Here's what we need. So we came up with multiple different ways of doing that, and they all got rejected, right? And we're like, I thought the mandate was clear, like, do this. And so it wasn't until it went all the way back up to the CEO going, like, what do you actually want? And then he could relay, oh, I need it done this way for these reasons. We were then able to get it done how he wanted it done. But it was on our end, it was very frustrating, because we spent days and days, in a scramble trying to get things done by his deadline. We skated in at the very end, with his new mandate and his new direction. But a simple explanation of the why would have solved all of that frustration and allowed us to get it done even earlier than he wanted it done.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry I had to go through that, but what a great learning opportunity and good story.
Yeah, it was a learning opportunity.
Well, and even as you're saying that, I'm looking at the slide saying, what data should you try to gather? Well, maybe I think I'd really like my team to hustle around and get a bunch of suggestions. But if we don't think about those unintended consequences, then we end up frustrating the very people who we want to motivate and inspire.
And Trish, if I could maybe just jump in real quick, this is Riley again. To Maria's point, I would say that optimism doesn't necessarily mean lack of fear. You know, I mean, I think I've definitely, you know, had a strong sense of insecurity and fear as well, trying to navigate this. But to your point, Trish, I think understanding what I can and can't control and what my sphere of influence is helpful in this, and trying to at least compartmentalize a little bit about what impact I can have versus what I'm a little bit more subject to, and that's helpful, at least. I don't know.
That's super helpful, and it helps to be very aware that every person you add to your network, every person you collaborate with, increases your sphere. Okay, increases the size of your domain. It might not increase your power, but it increases your reach. Okay, and that often is the difference between kind of, you know, staying inside your own bubble and breaking through to make positive change. So thank you, Riley. Do we have other comments or chats?
No chat.
Okay. Well, I'm going to pause for a moment. So we're at the 1 hour mark, and I did promise that I'd just make a couple announcements because some people need to jump off. This is a free offering to you or your company or your team, and especially now, we have tons of students who do strategic leadership projects. They do them in classes, and they're looking for real-world projects. Maybe you don't have time to get to something right now, or you want more arms and legs and help. All you have to do is get in touch with EP, and I know at least one of the people on this call has already got a project in with us, and the students do analysis, they come up with recommendations, they can gather data, do surveys for you. There's no cost to you. All you do is share. There's a little picture over here to the right of one of the teams doing a presentation to the leadership of one of the project team companies. And this is something that we've started a few years ago, and it's really growing. We're looking for projects, and hopefully you have something that you'd like a student perspective on. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm currently part of the Goff Strategic Scholars Program right now. So I'm part of that program now. And so I just want to chime in and say that the projects that we have been able to get through, especially your guys' work, shout out EP, they have been formative in like my college career so far. I think having the opportunity to work on some really amazing like real world problems has shaped how I am going to go into my career in the future and the rest of my college career. So I just want to say, if you can give a great project for the future classes, we would love it.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I could tell that was really heartfelt. It's wonderful to see the impact and great for you to do the hard work. So fantastic. I have another announcement that might apply to more people, which is we've been doing these slams once a month, and we're going to do them virtually until further notice. So again, we'll send this out to you, but they're usually on Tuesdays, and our next couple topics are authenticity, integrity, path to value. Usually if people want to hang around after the formal part, we talk about anything people want to talk about. So if you are become a regular, we'll start to shape our dialogue, and we'll get better at this virtual thing too as we go along. Okay, any other questions or comments or fantastic testimonials like Brian? Okay, I'm going to go back to our agenda. And the next piece is about all chaos is not created equal. And some of you have seen a model that I use quite a lot, which is about levels of uncertainty, being able to say, is this thing, you know, as hard as I think it is? Am I overestimating the magnitude of the unknowns or underestimating? Okay, because as Charlie Munger always says, knowing what you don't know is more useful than being brilliant. And if you don't know who he is, he's the person who tells Warren Buffett what to do at Berkshire Hathaway. So he's been fairly successful in both strategy and financial investment for decades. And he focuses on what you don't know. So knowing what you don't know is vital. And we actually have a little model that helps you to start with what you know. So what do we know about razor blades? What do we know about voice versus text? What do we know about viral contamination? And the check mark here is to remind you to check what you know. You may have known it as recently as yesterday, and it may have changed. So I might know how many razor blades a typical American male goes through in a month, and I could be totally wrong because it has now changed. And that's some of the stuff that catches up with companies who take too much for granted. But then there's all kinds of things that are unknown. Unknowns are how many other companies are going to be like Dollar Shave Club and come into my market if I'm Gillette. Unknowns are how many people are really going to effectively self-isolate or socially distance themselves. Now, some of those unknowns are totally unknowable, and some of them are knowable. And what we want to do in our little magnifying glass tells us we want to figure out as much as we can that's knowable. So do the analysis, collect the data, talk to people, keep your ears open, hear the faint signals, verify your model. And then those knowable things go up into the known pile and keep checking on them to see if they change. But that's the whole side of the page, the known and the knowable. That's often where some of us spend too much time, because it's such a great adrenaline rush to figure something out, to say, I didn't know that, but hey, guess what? Now I know it. Okay, I didn't know how many people were going to buy the razors. I figured it out. I didn't know how much price elasticity there was if I give a coupon for $2. Now I know. This is where a lot of us spend our time, especially if we've been successful in business. And over here on the right-hand side is where we should spend our time if we want to be great strategic leaders. Okay? On what's unknown and what ends up remaining unknowable even after we've done all the best work we can. And that's called the residual uncertainty. Okay? These are the things that can't be known until time passes. Now, what I don't want you to spend your time just beating yourself up and trying to figure out something that can't be figured out. Okay, if it's one of the things, that's why I use that Charlie Munger quote, knowing what you don't know is really important. Knowing what you can't know is really important. Okay, and then what do you do with that residual uncertainty? Well, I want you to think about how big is it. If we just have a little residual uncertainty, we don't sweat it. We can pretty much build a good model. I have a little slide here that just lists out how you get to your residual uncertainty, which caps off what I just said. So I'm going to pass by that and get into the levels of uncertainty. If we don't have much residual uncertainty, we can develop a forecast. We can sort out what's going to happen next. Okay, so if I have a population of customers and they tell me what they want, and I know their past habits, and I know how much income they have, I can create a pretty good forecast. This is level 1 uncertainty. I'm still could be wrong, but I'm not going to be wrong by much. Okay, this is the kind of analysis you do if you're working in a heavy capital intensive industry like airlines and in comes a low cost airline. You don't panic. You don't think the world's coming to an end because JetBlue suddenly starts flying into San Jose Airport. If you're already Delta and you're at San Jose Airport, you figure out how many people are going to prefer their pricing, how many people are going to prefer their branding, how many people need to come to San Jose in any given day, season, month, or year, and you work out the model. We're not going to spend a lot of time here because there's not a lot of unknowns. But I want to caution you that a lot of us can spend our whole career just trying to work on level 1 uncertainty problems and never really become the leaders we could be. Because where it gets both more challenging and more rewarding is when we get into level 2, 3, and 4. And there's only 4, so don't worry. There's no level 5, 6, 7. There's only 4 levels. Level 2 uncertainty is when you're just not sure how it's going to break. So the biggest one here is elections, to be honest. There's an alternative future. Will one person or another person get elected? Once the election happens, it's very clear. And prior to the election, you actually can do a lot of alternative futures. Some people call these scenarios. I used to do scenarios for Blue Cross and Blue Shield when, it's a long time ago, but the idea was, how will healthcare be different if Barack Obama is elected versus Hillary Clinton being elected? So I'm going way back. But there were some large and some small projected differences. There were a few distinct outcomes, And this is just like in a company. If you need a certain amount of, let's say, grocery stores in your neighborhood, and a new grocery store comes in, should the competitive response be to, drop the prices and keep them out of town, or to switch up your offerings or change your brand positioning? This is really classic strategy stuff. And it's not that hard. You can get it wrong. You can make bad bets. But most of the time, we're not really talking about unknowns at level 2. Where we start talking about unknowns is at level 3 and 4. And where we are right now, I'm going to ask you, so think for a minute, are we at level 3 or are we at level 4? What's the difference? Well, level 3 is a range of futures. We can't have a discrete thing where one or the other will happen. And it doesn't have to be binary. In level 2, there could be 6 possible futures, but it's a finite number. In level 3, there's not a finite number. Okay? We don't know how much or how long. We don't know how many or who. So there are a few key uncertainties. And just to make this more tangible, one of the places that I did a lot of level 3 work was on when electronic payment systems were first coming into play. And right now, cryptocurrency is very similar. You need someone who's willing to back the currency. You need someone who's willing to use the currency. You need the players to be on the banking side and the retail side and the consumer side. And this range is how many consumers are going to adopt it and how many retailers are going to adopt it. And then you can draw a curve. But you can't, and there's too much uncertainty about both the retailers accepting the currency and the consumers using the currency, and they're interrelated. So we can't make a nice, neat model like in level 2. So it could be, some people are saying we're at level 3 right now in terms of the current situation of, how many people will be out of work and how much will that impact our economy, for example. And we can build a curve that shows us how, if it's, way out here or closer in. Is it going to be 30% unemployment that lasts for 6 months, or is it going to be 12% employment that lasts for 11 months, or is it going to be some other number and some other length of time? Okay, that would be a level 3 problem. They're tricky, they're tough, but you can start to think about at least the magnitude of the issues. If we get to level 4, this is true ambiguity. Okay, this is what was happening in multimedia the last 5 or 6 years. Is there going to be network television? Who's going to be making content? Who's going to be streaming content? Who's going to be paying for content? Who's going to be paying the actors? Is it all going to be reality shows? What's happening? And it was very hard to even make a level 3 calculation about what was going to happen to companies like DirecTV or players in cable, internet, television, content development. And now we're seeing it resolve. We're seeing Disney and Apple and Hulu and lots of different players take up more of a structured industry. But for a few years, it was very much almost impossible to forecast. This hardly ever happens. Some people are saying we're in level 4 uncertainty right now. We don't know how much unemployment. We don't know how much disease. We don't know how contagious. We don't know how unstable the government might be. We don't know whether people will stop using money. You can create a scenario, and I'd put it to you. How many of you think we're in level 3 where you can model what might happen next? And how many think we're in level 4 where there's just too many different uncertainties coming from too many different areas, and we just have to, in true ambiguity, you basically have to wait it out.
I think we're in level 3, but pretty much every day it seems that the work that I did the previous day is now irrelevant. And so I feel like new things are coming that I would have never even expected to have happened. Even looking at, reading up on how China and other countries approach the problem, and then looking at ours, I think we're acting a lot different. And so I don't know, I feel, and maybe that's just the emotion speaking, that I'm thinking we're more in ambiguity versus something we can model and predict.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Others, or if you want to put in chat, just a 3 or a 4, EP can kind of scan down and see where we're coming to as a group. But please do comment. There's no real wrong answers here. This is just truly a dialogue.
We have 1 vote for level 3 and 1 vote for level 4. A comment that there's variations, or it's level 4 because the variations to so many different industries. We have another vote for level 3.
Okay. Anybody want to comment on the level 3s? And part of it is your unit of analysis. So maybe just for higher education, we could say it's a level 3. How much goes online and how many students register for summer classes, or some things that we want to get our heads around so that we can take action that won't be undone tomorrow.
We have another vote for level 4.
Okay. Can we hear some new voices? Toma, we haven't heard from you. Thomas, Kevin, Hillary, Morgan.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, finally. I think we're probably in level 3, I would say. I don't know, to me, like just seeing level 4, I'm like, this is pure anxiety. And and I don't feel that yet. So I don't know, I honestly think one of the main reasons for this whole chaos is that so many people are reacting, like so many people are in this survival mode, like they're so driven by fear, and so they're just reacting to things. They're not really thinking. They're like, oh, this person grabbed toilet paper, maybe they know something I don't, and I will go for it, right? So this is why we see like irrational things like that happening. It's like, why do we need toilet paper? Like, there's no need for toilet paper right now, or water, like a couple of weeks ago it was water. So yeah, I don't know. I vote for level 3.
Okay, thanks, Toma.
Yeah.
Others? Let's hear some other points of view. And it is very true that when we're more on that emotional side, a lot of peer pressure and social signals get amplified. And when we're more on the analytic side, then we can shut down some of those, but we may be overly caught up in numbers and trends and miss out some intuition. So neither one is perfect.
We have oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking that based on the variables, you mentioned within a university that is kind of like an environment that we have control over, right? Like you have to control your faculty, students, grades, classes, how many classes you're teaching, when classes. So it's a very small amount of variables. When we're talking about the whole country, then you have, business people and the economy and all these industries and the health side. So I think as far as country goes, I would say 4, and then higher education is definitely a 3.
Okay.
And that aligns pretty well with the 2 comments that we just received on the chat. The first is that they would vote a level 4 because mainly they don't want to build all the models that are possible. So that back to depends what you're looking at. And then the next one is a level 3 because they refer to specific market conditions. And we've experienced similar pandemics as well. So this comment also says there are new precedents. New precedents being set, but I don't see the paradigm shifting in a completely new direction. So that's interesting. And then if I can, there's one more comment for level 3. We haven't faced a widespread infectious disease in a while, but it's not as if society hasn't faced this before. We have some ideas of how people will respond to the pandemic and have more knowledge of viruses than ever before.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing those. Anybody else? Kevin, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was thinking along the lines of 3 because the things that I've been reading in The Economist, Al Jazeera, and then the company emails that I've been given, it seems like the leadership of some of the like local, state, and federal government, at least some of them, and then some companies have an idea of how they're going to handle this. And even though we have a lot of people that are saying, oh, they grabbed a whole bunch of some product that might not be needed, they're going a little crazy, the leadership of the companies tend to have an idea of what they're going to do to handle it and where they're going to go, at least from what I've seen.
Okay. No, and this is, and I really encourage you, again, look for faint signals, look for the story that's not being told by the media. A lot of the really fast, quick written journalism is, making these meta-analysis, and it might be your local market or your industry or even the segment of your industry you're in. So I can talk about education writ large, and we can think about whether student debt's going to be forgiven. Well, actually, whether or not student debt is forgiven is not going to impact, as I think Maria said, the kinds of things that might be under our control of what courses do we offer, how do we offer them, how do we adjust our assessment process for people who are taking tests at different times. There's a number of things we can be doing, and I'd encourage you to look for those things under your control and just then be careful you don't overcorrect and then you're too small. And I can really focus on getting this assessment right because I know I'm in control of it, and I miss the whole boat that other schools are, right now putting their whole catalogs online or giving their courses away for free. So you still have to always be managing that polarity, right? How much you're looking inward, what you can control, and how much you're looking outward at what might impact you, the outside forces. Any other comments on this? And some of you have seen this model before. I think it's really important in your world to think about how diagnosing the level of uncertainty affects your response. Does it make you more ready to leap? Does it make you more ready to do analysis? And then I do a shout out here for some friends of mine who wrote a great article, which is where this model came from. Back in the 90s, it's held up amazingly well. But if you want to go back to the source and reference it, you can have the article. I'm looking at the time here, and we're running pretty on track. We do have time for more conversation if you'd like to take a pause or even think back to what we've already talked about tonight. Thinking about your role in recognizing uncertainty, paying attention to those faint signals, and thinking about what a zero moment event could be for your industry or your company. And then acknowledging your biases towards or away from analysis and emotions, helping other people process some of their emotions or helping other people to see patterns in data are really important roles that you can take on as a strategic leader, even if you don't have any formal authority.
Trish,
Okay.
Where do you think we are?
Oh, where do I think we are in terms of number 3 and number 4?
Yeah.
I think we're 3. I think we would go to a 4 if anybody starts bombing anybody, or if countries specifically close off supply chains. So if China stops shipping us medical supplies, or if the Middle East erupts, or if the refugee situation becomes a real spot of contagion, then I think we're going to head to 4. But I think right now we're in 3. Just my opinion. Thanks for asking. And I think many of us are solidly in 3 or even heading towards 2 in terms of, for better or worse, if you're running a restaurant, it might be at level 2. Are we going to keep going with curbside service and try to do home delivery, or are we going to shut down and let everybody go? That's a level 2 decision tree. It's not how much and how long and what if. So there's sort of a counterintuitive piece that your uncertainty can be rather low when your degrees of strategic freedom are rather low. Other questions or comments?
Hillary commented that she thinks it's a level 3 because government intervention and commitment to social distancing / business closures will determine if we end up closer to China or to Italy. So I think looking at the level of compliance can also help determine which level 2, 3, or 4 you're at.
Nice comment. Excellent. And we can learn a lot from looking at analogs and other countries, especially if we make adjustments for our own systems. Nice. All right, I'm going to move on to our last topic for their last formal topic for tonight, which is setting priorities, communicating clearly, and making good choices. This is the part where it comes to, okay, so what are we going to do about this? All right, you're going to make decisions. You're going to take action. What I want you to think about, if you want to go back and say, okay, what can I do tomorrow, next week? What can I go and talk to my team about? Is think about how you can test your assumptions. Okay, so you might have some key assumptions, and maybe your key assumption is about social distancing. Maybe your key assumption is about how much, I don't know, how much toilet paper people need during a month at home. Whatever your assumptions are, we have to make assumptions right now about student learning outcomes for online classes. Okay, so what would be a way I can test at the lowest possible cost? Well, maybe I add more quizzes, and I'm doing, instead of waiting till the midterm exam, I'm evaluating if the students are learning anything from the online format that we just switched to. Okay, so what's that for you? Is it asking your donors what their new thoughts are about their next year's giving, especially since the tax deadline has been shifted? Is it reaching out to your employees to reassure them so that morale doesn't drop and productivity doesn't drop? What key assumptions are both potentially harming to you or helpful to you, and how can you test those? Okay. Because what you want is, you don't actually want to try to make a straight plan or a forecast through a level 3 or 4 uncertainty. Okay. You want to create a bunch of options for yourself. Well, we could, if we're young brands, we could start doing home delivery. We could, I don't know if they're big enough to be able to buy a company like a Blue Apron. We could get into the catering business. We could have our restaurants be a location where people gather to form community. We could do a number of things. Well, and again, I'm focusing on that it has to be low cost, because you don't want to have a lot of options that are committing all your resources, and you certainly don't want to make one really strong bet the company play, because that's too risky. Okay? So your actions are going to be based on your own leadership and on your followers. Do your followers have an appetite for risk? Do they have the kind of skill sets where they can imagine multiple futures, where they can multitask and manage different options, where they can make trade-offs on the fly? If so, then that's great. If not, then work with what you have. Meet your people where they are, and be kind to yourself, because you may also not have the skill set that would allow you to do everything you want to do right now. So what can you do? And then if you set some parameters, if you say, you know, I'm going to watch these, let's go back to when we talked about the indicators, right? I'm going to watch the leading indicators. I'm going to get my real-time information. And maybe I see that we're getting too low on cash. Maybe I see that our customers are migrating over to a competitor. Maybe I see that my donors have really shifted their priorities. Then I'm going to withdraw from some of those options. And remember, I don't think we've talked about this tonight, but remember, what is an option? An option is something where you have the right, but not the obligation to continue. So if I create the option to do home delivery or curbside takeout with a restaurant, which many of us are seeing right now, it's an option. I don't have to continue it. I can stop it tomorrow. Once I've made it permanent, it's no longer an option. So I want to keep my options open. We've all heard this, but even more important when you're navigating uncertainty, to keep your options open, but keep your eyes open and be watching for when something changes, and then you either want to double down or you want to withdraw. And what you're watching for, what you're waiting for, is that signal strength to come up, and then act while you still have enough strategic freedom to do something about it before it's too late. Make sense? Comments? I'm gonna soon ask you how it applies to you in your world, so you won't be surprised. But think of a couple things you could be doing. And for you personally, it could be, if you're concerned about your own job, an option could be looking into who's hiring right now. An option could be talking to a few friends who are in industries that are growing, okay? An option, and these are just options. You're keeping your day job, or you're keeping your grades up in school while you're starting to explore other opportunities, other possibilities. Anybody have an example of some options they're exploring, either their company or themselves right now or soon? Love to get some sharing, or even just something that might have popped in your mind tonight. You've got a really nice opportunity to get feedback from lots of people on an idea you want to spitball. Lisa, I'm going to call you out. Do you have a microphone?
I do. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very clearly. Do you have any options you're considering these days with the current uncertainty?
What brought to mind is what I'm hearing colleagues who are in some traditional businesses. The first thing that came to mind is how I'm seeing people offer free trials, and how I'm also investigating somewhat cynically, there have so much slack right now where so many things have been canceled or shifted, that it's such a wise way to keep their people involved and engaged and setting things up. And so these free trials of things that used to be, pay per seat or pay per use, it fascinates me. And so I'm watching people pivot. Another example I've seen that's interested me is when people offer to scholarship. It's just a version of this. How do we engage people who can't engage and engage those who are benefiting from this time or not suffering as much this time, and even feel guilty? I just am watching businesses be creative, and those were just two examples. I thought this free trial experiment is keeping salesmen and women engaged. It's interesting.
Good. No, great observations. And yeah, I've seen some paywalls of journalism are dropped because they want to share more with people, but I think it's sort of it's not really a race to the bottom, it's a race to the open door, and making your whole publication catalog available, or making it easy to learn a language while you're at home. There's a number of these that I think we could be exploring more to see, how is it going? What kind of new data is coming out? Are we seeing different behaviors? Thanks, Lisa. Others, or anything on the chat?
There's another comment that I think it's Zach. Says, I'm an account manager, so in-person client visits have been my norm. I think we are testing how Zoom meetings will impact our business relationships and whether or not that will continue into the future, even after the crisis is over. There are a lot of costs and time efficiencies with not having to get on a plane for 2 to 3 days. Will our relationships be just as strong via virtual meetings as they have been nourished with in-person meetings or not?
That's a great one, and time will tell. And it'd be interesting if you have within your Powers Act to reach out to more people in your role and sort of collect a little data, even if it's not really formalized. There are a couple articles that EP and I have collected that have, you may have already seen them, but 20 or 30 experts opining on how much the world will change. Will we be at a new normal? Will retail come back? Will habits change? I don't know if any of you have ever shopped at Stu Leonard's. It's a store I'm familiar with from Connecticut. They've put plexiglass shields between the cashiers and the customers so that there's not you're not breathing. It reminds me of the salad bar kind of plastic. Once those go up, will they ever go down? So some are small things, some could be much larger, but we're going to share, if you want to have this little collection of points of view from all different people, salespeople, scientists, activists, people who are involved in sustainability, who are watching things like the sky over China clear up a bit, I guess, with so much less pollution right now. And in a way, this is, I hope, it's not going to directly impact decisions you make, but it might help you to be able to communicate more clearly with your team, to have another story to add to the way that you're shaping the narrative around the change you or your company or your team might need to make. There are many individual responses, and I've listed a bunch here just to give you, again, just more to go away with. Think about how you provide meaning and purpose to others. Maybe there's definitely people in education, and sorry to keep bringing it back, but that is where we're living, and you can share your examples from where you're living. But not being able to graduate with your class, not being able to finish out the year, we're trying to create opportunities for celebration and connection with students because they're missing out on something that they were expecting. You can always just continue to act as you always do, with integrity and authenticity. Just be the beacon, be the person who is reliable and truthful and transparent throughout, no matter what's going on. And keep fostering trust. Be resilient, and even, again, process your own emotions and your own biases, but be committed to continuously learning. What signals did you miss? Who did you fail to persuade? How can you do better next time? Okay. You may have done your best, but your best tomorrow will be better than your best yesterday. I've said a number of times, keep processing your emotions and also process data, and then look at how they interrelate. That's really the key thing there. Real strategic leaders are always moving. They don't see them as being opposed the way many of us have been taught. They see that the data is informed by the behavior of people, which is emotional. And once people see the data, there's another emotional response. So it's very interrelated. And then as a leader, you can recognize what others are trying to do. We're seeing a lot of recognition for medical professionals right now, but FedEx delivery men and even your own salespeople in your own team. Recognize that everybody's doing the best they can, and we all have different networks. Some of us are being directly impacted by somebody who's critically ill at the moment, and others of us are in a different situation. Celebrate the small successes. That's always good leadership. Okay, and not phony. This has to be integrated with having integrity. People can tell if you're creating a participation award. That's not what we mean. Really look for people who are making progress, who are learning, who are taking those options, doing those experiments. And then change the conversation. Don't talk about how different today is from yesterday. Shift the conversation to how much more and different opportunity you'll be able to exploit and leverage in the future. Some of you will be able to provide air cover for others, right? Maybe there's somebody who really needs to be home with their kids right now, and you can, find a way to give them extra vacation or cover their shift. And there's a number of ways where, even if we're not the CEO, we can provide ways to enable and support others' success. And keep sharing what you know. Think consciously. I know something, I've heard something, I talked to a customer, I've read something, in the news. Who do I want to share that with? Maybe it's a blog post, a newsletter, a chat group, a webinar. Maybe it's a one-on-one, or it's an email you send to your CEO. But really think about how when information lands with you, it shouldn't stay there. The only way that it's useful is when it's shaped, combined, and shared. Then I leave a blank space for your own individual responses to things that you might do above and beyond what's listed here. And you don't have to do all this, but take something and say, tomorrow I'm going to recognize the efforts of my admin who's been shifting all the meetings and all the events. I'm going to recognize how, you know, somebody really overcame their fears to do something new and different this week that they never thought they could have done before. Just find some ways to keep expressing your leadership and help others express theirs. Comments here or suggestions or things to add to the list? There's another level here too. I've given you a number of institutional responses. So it might be that you're doing the best you can already. Maybe you're doing everything on that list, but then what can your organization do? What can your team or your division or your department do? Can you do some small experiments? Maybe you can't get, you know, the highest level clearance to, I don't know, EP, did we ask anybody's permission to do what we're doing tonight? Probably not. This is sort of an experiment that we're doing. But is there some way you can try to serve customers in a new way, reach out to retain employee morale in a different way? It could be at the high level. Some of you have a lot of formal responsibility and others don't. Is there a way you can use rapid prototyping in your organization? Okay? And what is rapid prototyping? It's coming up with a new process or product and then cobbling it together and trying it out. It's experimentation. It's not waiting months or years for something to be perfect. We're hearing that some people want to use rapid prototyping for vaccines right now. Can you, through your institution, reward risk-taking? Can you come up with some kind of a hackathon or some kind of a gamification that'll get people to come up with some new ideas that are a little more outside the norm for your industry or for your company? Can you find new partners? Who wins if you win? Who should you be joint venturing with? If you're a struggling not-for-profit, there must be other struggling not-for-profits, and maybe you can, you know, collaborate in ways that allow you to glean the resources you need to move forward. Or it could be, you know, Home Depot they're working with somebody to do, I think, some kind of testing in their parking lots, you know. So there's some interesting joint ventures that we're seeing, and they're at the institutional level, but you aren't the institution, but you are the institution. You influence your own decisions and then decisions that amplify out to create maybe scenarios that might be able to change. I mean, we're talking about the coronavirus. I'm going to jump back to talking about Gillette for a minute. Can I create a scenario that says, hey, what if we do an experiment and start shipping Gillette razors to people's houses and start our own sort of direct-to-consumer scenario? How would that play out? And overall, be transparent. Help your institution be transparent. Maybe you're already having town halls and group meetings, but maybe not. Maybe things are just getting posted on a website somewhere. Okay. Other institutional responses are linking incentives, meaning if to get the kind of behaviors, the kind of motivation, the kind of risk taking you want, you provide new incentives. Salespeople might not be able to make their commissions. Restaurant workers might not be able to make their tips. How do you shift as an institution to acknowledge a new reality? And over communicate. Okay, say things, say them again, say them again. This always reminds me of Jack Welch, because he had to be the CEO who said things over and over, and he was the head of GE during sort of the internet time, but a lot of it was before that. So it was press conferences and press releases and news articles, and he would be so tired of saying the same thing over and over. And just then he'd run into somebody who'd say, wow, that's the first time I've heard that. And it would just make him realize that there's always somebody who hasn't heard it yet, or somebody who heard it but they hadn't really listened, or the penny hadn't dropped, as we say. Get your customers talking to you and get some feedback there. Maybe change the way you're hiring and rewarding your people, and definitely think about these options, not just for yourself, but for your company. What kind of options can you come up with? Whether it's, you know, thinking about, can we delay an investment for a certain period of time? Can we create a new kind of partnership and leave it open-ended and only continue if it starts to work out for us? some of you have had a lot of coursework or real experience in options, and some of you haven't, but I'd encourage you to really think about small bets that you don't actually have to pursue unless it makes sense. And you'll know more tomorrow, and you'll know more the day after tomorrow. And as you get more information, you'll be more ready to take action. But you can't start from kind of a cold start. You know, you can't react after it's a zero moment if you haven't been preparing and taking out some options all along. All right, then I leave you a blank to say, how's your institution going to respond? And maybe you're going to do some of these things, maybe you already are. But these institutional responses and these individual responses are just a peek into the kinds of things you can do. You are not powerless. You have many levers, and you have many opportunities to either stop things that'll destroy value, or start things that'll create value, or create partnerships that'll open up new value opportunities. So I'm going to pause there. Questions, comments, anything you don't like on here, things you've already done, encouragement for others. Let's hear from you all.
When you mentioned the sharing information and insights, that reminded me of, you know, what we're trying to do. We had to furlough a bunch of employees, and we're trying to figure out how we keep in contact with them and keep them engaged while they're gone. But there's a lot of specific rules around what you can and can't communicate to them. Like, you can't communicate anything work related. So we're like, well, let's just share. Like, we thought of doing like almost like a book club type thing. Like, get them all a book and send it to them and be like, hey, here's something we're all going to be doing together while you guys are out. We're going to be doing it with you. Anyway, that was, you mentioned that, and I thought, well, there's my validation that's an idea worth pursuing.
That is definitely an idea worth pursuing. And especially some of these models that say we're going to rebound quickly assume that you can hire back the people you let go. And that you're going to be so much better positioned if they've kept that connectivity, they've kept in that dialogue, and they haven't jumped ship to take a different job or kind of had a negative impression and they don't want to come back. Really good. Really good. Other suggestions, ideas? I like that.
Something I don't see in there, Trish, but that I tried, I guess it's the blank line, is I'm using this time and this shift to start business with colleagues that I trust and that I'm excited to work with. And it keeps my sanity. It helps use some of the weird pockets of time. So it provides meaning and purpose. It does some of the things in the box, but I think we can just individually go after some of the dreams or thoughts that we had, even though that sounds almost too positive in such a downtime. It kind of helps, just another idea.
No, I really like that. You know, I do. It's and it may be a pocket of time. I mean, being let go or underutilized is only a problem if you don't find something to do with that extra time or that extra capacity. And even some companies that can't pursue their main line of business are trying not to let people go and trying to repurpose people. So you're talking about repurposing your pockets of time and your passion. These are all worthwhile. But they take some courage and they take some commitment. So, other examples? Anything in the chat, CP?
Yeah, there's one in the chat that is also filling in the blank line. Find a mentor to bounce your thoughts with. Bounce your thoughts off of.
That's really great. And just connect with people right now. I mean, honestly, I think you'll find so many more. I hope you're already seeing the people who can't perform their music are still making concerts and getting people to listen to them, and the people who have extra time are offering their services in new and different ways. So there's a lot of small stuff, and I think overall we'll feel that as it builds over time, or we won't. And that's in itself part of this whole process. So navigating the unknown is really having your own goals in mind and keeping them in mind. And we haven't talked that much about goals, but it's probably a good place for us to land as we start to wrap up tonight, is what is it you really want? And if what you really want is for your company to survive and grow and thrive, then your employees and your customers are your top priority. If what you really want is your personal passion and to pursue something that you care more deeply about, then how can you continue within the domain you have control over, no matter what's going on in the outside world? But your goals are going to dictate everything else you're doing, and it comes back to your core, it comes back to the role you play, and it comes back to your embracing this and not being afraid to really look straight at it. And it's very tempting to think, spend a lot of your time thinking about the past and thinking about what you wish would happen, as opposed to having the courage to face head on the reality you're in and think about the future. Just to wrap us up here, I want you to really think hard about what individual responses you can activate and what institutional responses you can initiate. And you might not be able to make them happen on your own. You might need to find support or discuss them with others. There are seeds you can plant now, and you might not see immediate change, but you'll see the change. So in your world, in each of these 4 areas, we've got some prompts to continue to think about or maybe talk about with others. I'll remind you that really everyone is a strategic leader. You don't need the formal authority to make choices and lead people. You have your own vision of where you want to be, where you want your team to be. And I love the idea of using this uncertain period to reach out to mentors and to find others who can help you grow your skills and build your strengths. A lot of leadership is not just the thinking, but it's converting your thinking to doing and coordinating that with others. You can do so much more once you're collaborating with others. You build out your domain, you build out your sphere of influence, and you have much more impact. And then be ready. Okay? A lot of what you might be doing now as that faint signal becomes stronger, or as we move into this unknown future, is you may be tapped or find the opportunity or see a void of leadership, and you need to be ready. So how can you continue to make yourself as ready as you can be to step into the next phase of your own strategic leadership journey? And part of that is what you're doing tonight. It's talking to others, it's putting yourself out there, it's committing the time and the energy to push your thinking, maybe do a little reading, talk to others. If no one objects, we can share your emails with each other, and you can carry on this conversation or connect with others as you wish. There's a lot more, but I think we can all navigate the levels of uncertainty. Hopefully you'll develop, it doesn't have to be a correct perspective, but an informed perspective. Look straight into where you are, develop some options about what you think happens next, and then do what you can as a person and as a part of a group, as a part of an organization that's consistent with your vision to move into the future and to create value, to prevent value destruction, and to make a difference. I want you to think about what you'll do and what you'll stop doing. Maybe stop reading the news that's just reinforcing your concerns. Maybe stop wishing that things were different and start making them be different. Communicate more. Think about how you communicate. It's not just the words you say, it's your attitude, it's your actions. And when we're socially distanced, we're going to be challenged by communication. So who will you inspire? Who will you reach out to? How will you reach out? what will be your story, and how will you continue to be your best self? I want to hear from more of you. If you don't feel like talking tonight and you want to get in touch with us afterwards, of course, you know, EP and I are always ready to talk about strategic leadership and to connect you hopefully with other resources that'll help you. We do have some podcasts. We did some podcasts with Workfront. They're all free. So if you want to listen to the one about navigating the unknown, there's a link to it here in the slides that you're going to get from us. There's actually 6 or 7 of these podcasts. So if you really have a lot of time on your hands, you can listen to all of them. There's one for each of the 6 strategic principles and a bonus overview. And stay in touch with us. Our physical presence isn't a big deal right now, but we're going to have a bigger online presence, and we're a resource for all of you. And we hope that we add value to your lives, and you certainly add a lot to us.
I just want to say thanks everyone for joining. Feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't sent me your email, then unless you've been to a SLAM before, if you haven't chatted me your email, then I have no way of sending you these materials and those links that Trish keeps talking about. So please, you can send me a private chat to the host, Trish Gorman, or the host, or whatever pops up in your chat, but please send us your email if you want to get this slide deck. Thanks.
Great. Yes, and everyone, be well, be kind, be strong, all that great stuff. You know I mean it, even though at this point you've heard me talk way too much tonight. And share this if you'd like to. This is all recorded. If you want to share it, or if you want to share the slides once you have them, it's totally fine. There's no proprietary stuff here that we're not willing to share broadly. So thank you again. Hope you come back next month.
Thank you, Trish. That was awesome.
For hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you.